Well, welcome everyone. Exciting times. Future Strong is back, and what an episode to relaunch us with the wonderful Farouk Dey from Johns Hopkins University. I'm going to let him do a formal introduction of himself shortly, but first of all, hi everyone. Welcome back. Great to start again with Future Strong, and we've got a wonderful guest, Farouk Dey from Johns Hopkins University. I'm going to let him introduce himself fully in a minute. My name's Nikki Garchair, and I am the co-founder of Capfinity, and I head up the Americas. And I am joined on Future Strong, as I always am, by my wonderful co-host, Lindsay Pollock. And for any of you who don't know Capfinity, we are a strengths-based recruitment and development business supporting companies all over the world. And if you've never listened into Future Strong, Lindsay and I bring in guests to talk about all things careers and recruitment that will help people at these times grow stronger. So Lindsay, you're back in New York, this exciting times. Tell us, how have you been since we haven't been on air?
I feel like this is the first day of school. I'm so excited to be back on Future Strong. Yes, after 9 long months in the lovely state of Connecticut, I'm back in New York City. I'm back with my coffee cart, iced coffee from 83rd and Broadway. We are so happy to be back. My name is Lindsay Pollock. I'm a career expert and author of 4 books. My latest is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. I am a proud brand ambassador for Capfinity, and we are so delighted to have so many of you with us today. Good morning to Fred Burke in New York, or possibly in Massachusetts. Please, everyone, say hello. Let us know where you're calling in from. And it is my huge pleasure to introduce Farouk Dey, who is a longtime friend, someone I admire so much. Farouk, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, and I really want to call out your title because it is one of the most innovative and progressive that we have seen. So tell us about you and how you came to the title of Vice Provost for Integrative Learning and Life Design at Johns Hopkins University. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, and the admiration is mutual. Love all the work that you do, and thank you, Nikki, for having me today with you, and welcome everyone. So I'm Farouk Dey, Vice Provost for Integrative Learning and Life Design at Johns Hopkins University. I've been at the university for 3 years, and the title really came at the conversation of my recruitment. And it was less about having the right title for me and more about having the right narrative about what we are trying to accomplish at the university and also in higher education. I believe strongly, and I've been fortunate to partner now with the wonderful university and the university leadership with the university that also believes that in higher education, we shouldn't be in the business of having students just plan their careers. Because let's face it, how many of us on this call who are tuning in, or just even the ones who are talking, who are doing what we had planned on when we were in our younger years? I believe strongly that career plans don't work. So instead, I believe in the concept of life design, in the concept of leveraging curiosity and tuning into our curiosity and inspiration and turning that into action and taking some risks and prototyping and being comfortable with uncertainty. But as you know, Lindsay and Nikki, when we start talking about being comfortable with uncertainty, not knowing what you will do in the future, and taking risks, we start talking also about privilege, that there are people who are privileged enough to be able to do that and others who don't. So I came to Johns Hopkins really with that title, really to set the right narrative that we are here to make sure that the concept of life design, of taking these risks, is going to be equitable across the board, available to all students regardless of their backgrounds and social capital. So we had to do it in an integrative learning part. That means that it's not a service that students go to consume, but rather it's integrated throughout the entire learning experience so that all students get it, regardless of their background and social capital. So it's a movement we're leading, and it was important to set the right tone from the moment of announcing my hiring. And that has actually exactly worked out that way, that for the last 3 years, we've been growing these seeds that we've planted all across the university, and I think now it's spilling over to other universities in higher education.
Wow, it sounds absolutely amazing, Farouk. Will you just share with us how over the last 3 years you've managed to kind of integrate some of these things? What does this mean for how you work with faculty? How do you get students to kind of use the service? I'm completely intrigued how it plays out.
Well, so allow me, while I answer this question, to also give advice to some of our colleagues who might be thinking, how do I take big ideas like these and then just implement them in a complex system where decision making is not really centralized, and where you have to bring a lot of people on board, particularly faculty. So I appreciate that question. It was really important for us to set the narrative and then get the right partnerships in place. And then really, I mean, I think the advice that I often give is simplify that narrative and give people one or two things to just hang on to. So for us, it was really important. Like, what is life design? Well, is really about having people, students, have the right type of experiences and the right type of relationships. It comes down to that, is engage them in immersive experiences and engage them in enough connections with people and in networks that allow them to do that. So on the experience front, we started to really think about how we can make immersive experiences part of the curriculum, part of the work. So part of our Commission for Undergraduate Education that has been thinking about redoing the full education or full curriculum for education at Johns Hopkins. We started to look at the role of experience and immersive experiences, and we came up with a Hopkins semester that gives students the ability to use one semester out of their entire time at Johns Hopkins to participate in immersive experiences. It's kind of similar to the co-op model that you see in some other schools, but it's beyond just co-ops and internships, meaning that working on campus can be one of those immersive experiences. If it's designed properly, a study abroad experience, participating in some type of service for the community. So that's one way to integrate it. The second way to do it is to also have this conversation and this narrative be part of the admissions process and enrollment, so that we start from day one, even before, with the right type of narrative of why you're joining Johns Hopkins University, is that it's really going to be an opportunity for you to tap into your curiosity. And it's not what is your plan or what is your job and then what major you choose, but it's rather what are you curious about, what are you inspired by, and then what are the courses you take, the experiences you're going to have. And then finally, we were really set to create a culture of mentoring throughout the entire university with the right platform, and then stitching together all of these communities of mentoring that are across the university in a very decentralized model to have it just part of the common story and the common narrative. So given the institution and faculty and partners just one or two things to hang their hats on, and simplifying the message makes it possible, so that you go from an inspiring label that or title that maybe invites intrigue to just really some actionable things that everybody can do in order to move the needle.
That resonates so much with me, remembering back to my student days that I was just me, but it didn't seem to make sense to the university that I wanted to go to class, but also maybe study abroad and get a job and do other things that seemed to be in 10 different locations on campus that didn't feel integrated. So I think that really makes so much sense, and I think elevates the role of career services in that conversation to be equal with all of the other pursuits that students have on campus. Now, I would be remiss if I did not call out all of the amazing people we have in the audience. Farouk, many of them know you and you know them. So I want to just shout out that we have Carolyn from New Jersey. We have Margie in the Finger Lakes. We have Rosa from Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. Kathy from Charleston, South Carolina. Tehani from Bloomington, Indiana. My friend Marie Royce. Marie, good to see you. And we have Christina from Peoria, Illinois. Trudy Steinfeld from Boston, Leslie from Florida State, and Denise from beautiful Westchester County. Everyone, welcome, and please ask your questions for Farouk. Farouk, my next question to you is to really bring in that diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI perspective. You talked about the importance of making sure we acknowledge the privilege that some people have in this integrative process. Can you talk about how we can make sure that this is inclusive, and maybe some advice to our career services peers and professionals of how they can make sure to take that DEI lens?
Yeah, well, the best way to make anything inclusive is to make it for everyone. Is really using the universal design for learning approach. I often use the curb cuts on sidewalks example. That they were designed initially in order to accommodate for people with disabilities. Really, they, using the universal design approach, they're really used by everyone. It's people on scooters, on bikes, people who are walking their pathways. So if we make whatever approach we make it, if we try to move from accommodation for a few to make it just part of the system, make it part of the overall design so that it's there for everyone, then no one has to feel that they are trying to go for an accommodation or for an additional service that is peripheral. So it's interesting what you said, Lindsay, that this was just part of like your natural experience when you were a student. If I remember correctly, I think you were an RA, and I was too. So for the two of us who are naturally wired that way and go for the RA jobs and then just fully consume the university experience with leadership opportunities and immersive experiences, and when we find people who could be mentors, we gun for them and we schedule those meetings. That is what people like you and I do. It's really recognizing for the university that there are lots of students who are, one, not wired the way people who become RAs are. And then two, there are people who are coming into this new environment in higher education with the deer in the headlight look, that they are first to go to college in their families. They have not had any role models in their families who have gone to college and who can give them the simple advice of what to do, or what are the tricks or the things that you can take advantage of. These are people who have not learned how to navigate complex systems. And, as a former international student myself, coming from one system in my home country to the United States, I could tell you it is complex the first day, the first month, the first year. There are all of these things that you have to figure out how to navigate. And it's beyond just scheduling your classes and going to class and getting A's. Education is available to you in everything that you do, from intramural sports to athletics to clubs to all of the extracurricular activities, to your involvement in the residence hall, to the internships and study abroad, then on and on and on, and finding the mentors. I would have missed all of that had I not just gotten that RA job just like you did. The institution really has to think of all of the students who have not learned how to navigate complex systems because they did not do that at a younger age, because they grew up in different types of environments, and to just make it possible for everyone. Universities have really done a poor job on this one, that they structure really heavily the academic part, and then they offer lots of available opportunities outside of the classroom, but then they assume that you will figure this out as a student on your own. The idea is to integrate everything. Everything is integrated into the academic experience, from the admissions process to graduation, all the way to your alumni experience, so that you don't have to look for it. It's just part of your experience. It's just what happens. Mentoring shouldn't be something that you go look for, although there was a time when I used to think that way. I used to think, well, take responsibility of your own learning and go and find a mentor. But once I started to think that people's experiences impact how they approach these mentoring conversations, I realized that it should be approached the same way we design courses. This needs to be designed within And that's how we really do inclusion really well. It's not just about creating a center for inclusion and then sending our underrepresented minorities there. That might still serve a purpose. I think there's a broader conversation about changing curriculum, changing narrative at the university level, putting it in the admissions brochure, all the way to the alumni experience, changing our language from convocation all the way to graduation ceremony, and just being really thoughtful about making sure that people feel seen, heard, that they feel that they belong, and they are part of the university story. It's not just a marginal peripheral service that they have to go and take advantage of.
Farouk, I want to pull that out and just make sure to highlight what you just said, because it's so powerful to me. I know we have Fred Burke here, who's a good friend, and I interviewed Fred for my book, Recalculating, and I remember he told a story that he didn't know how to apply to graduate school, but he had to go and ask the Office of Graduate Admissions, how do I apply? And what you're saying is everyone should be told that. Everybody should be given that information. You shouldn't have to go seek it out. And that resonates to me so much, which is just making things available, not forcing people to apply to grad school, but making sure as part of the curriculum, you're getting that information. Am I interpreting what you're saying right?
Yeah, and it resonates, Lindsay, and I want to add to it that when I think of career services, for example, or higher education of the past, I think of promotions, bringing people in, how many people are showing up, convincing people that they should take advantage of, which is the old problem of all of these student services, including career services, is we have these wonderful things. How do we convince them to come? I think the new model moving forward is that anything less than 100% engagement in any of these types of transformative experiences and relationships is not inclusive. That is the bar we have to operate from. Anything less than 100%. And the only way to do this is through full integration into the academic experience, so that it is just what happens. This is what I often say to our teams at Johns Hopkins. It is just what happens at this university. It's not about making it mandatory. It is not about making it a condition for graduation. It is just making it part of just what happens in this university. No one is going to miss it because it's just there. And having it that way actually brings more partners from the academic side. Our faculty members really appreciate this thinking process. Universities in general are not big fans of adding more mandates for students. Mandatory just doesn't work. We're just seeing it even with the vaccines now. Like the more you mandate things, the more resistance you have. What we're talking really about is just making it part of the culture, part of the conversation. The president speaks about it, the admissions officer speaks about it, the faculty speaks about it, and we make it part of the life design journey. That what we're doing is having people participate in constant experimentation, and that includes the courses that they take, in constant conversations with people who can have an impact on them, and just making that just part of the journey. So that invites lots of partnerships to do that. I think that's how you really do inclusion, because when we think of DEI, when we think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I am thinking we're doing a lot of work on the process side, but we know if we're doing it right or not with the outcomes. That is really how we measure our success. Tell me that there are no gaps in outcomes between the haves and have-nots, and I'll know if you really have inclusion and equity in your institution and in your organization. We measure it by the gaps. And there are, the first time I measured this at Johns Hopkins, I was alarmed, although I wasn't surprised, but I was alarmed by the gaps that were there between our first generation students and non-first generation students, students who have low income or limited income backgrounds and their counterparts, our international students versus their counterparts, our women versus men in STEM fields, for example. And you can see these in how long it takes them to get a job, how many internships that they've had, the type of salaries that they get, whether or not they're satisfied with their experience. Do they even know what they are doing and what they're doing? Those gaps can be measured by all of us very easily, but it requires us just really being focused about it.
I'm listening to you, Farouk, and I'm thinking of all my clients who look at onboarding interns, look at how they bring in school leavers. And I'm just wondering two things. Do you sometimes get involved in helping that onboarding process? Because so much of what you describe, I think, is applicable to industry. And second, what is your engagement like at Johns Hopkins with recruiters? Because I imagine it's incredibly positive, but I'd love to hear what it's like from your perspective and how those relationships go. I'm sure they're listening in, so there's lots of positive things to say.
And you mean onboarding of new hires into their workforce, into workplaces?
Yeah, just a lot of what you're saying about this immersive piece. I think that industry could learn a lot from that as they bring in interns, as they bring students into their organization. So I'm just wondering if anyone asks you for advice.
Yeah, they do, and but I will say not enough. And it's not about us being asked advice, but I don't think that there is enough awareness that what's happening on the college campus today will be what will happen at the workplace 4 years from now or 10 years from now. I remember in the early years of the Black Lives Matter movement, I was at Stanford at the time, and I was standing literally in the crowd in the quad with my colleague looking at a protest. And at that time, Black Lives Matter had really grown to what we know it now. And I was thinking, like if employers aren't paying attention, they should, because this is going to be in their cafeterias and in their workplaces fairly soon. There has been, over the last decade especially, a call for people to want to be seen and to be heard and to feel that they belong, that this is no longer about compositional diversity, which has been, I would say, the earlier era of diversity, that companies and institutions went after numbers, how many people we have of the different races and ethnicities, etc. And then bingo, we are achieving diversity. There's been more of a movement of, like, when you bring people in from different backgrounds, you've got to create the right type of environment that helps them thrive and helps them feel like they belong. And what that means is that you allow them to be who they are. If you're bringing them into your organization, and you're going so much after diversity that once they come in, you don't want to force them to change, and it's about understanding yourself what diversity really means, and then how you bring the best out of these people from the perspective of their own cultures. So we've had these conversations with employers and with companies about how to successfully transition people over to their organization and help them be successful. But even just in that initial pipeline, I think there's been a lot of education. So, for example, I'll give you an initiative that we've done at Johns Hopkins under the leadership of a phenomenal executive in my team. Her name is Aliyah Punawala, who with her team and created the DEI Collective, a collective of 50 plus companies that have raised their hands and said, yes, we are going to contribute to creating a pipeline of diversity hiring from Johns Hopkins to our companies. And we're going to participate in all of these events and activities, et cetera, on campus in order to feed that pipeline. Well, what happened initially is that they would come in, they would look at all of the students, and then they will say, well, gosh, they're really great students, but we're really not finding the right fit. Already you're starting from a place of you're not wanting to change and you're wanting others to change to fit into your own model. So the initial numbers were quite low, that we had all of these students participate and we were not getting the match. And we had to go back in the same, that same first batch. So we didn't give up on it, thanks to Aliyah and her team. We had to go back and talk to these employers and have them look back at the candidates we brought to them from a different perspective. We started to have them really look at them from a perspective of, like, here are all the skills and the talents, and try to do a little bit of education. And to their credit, these employers went back and looked and worked with us on it. And the numbers went back up. They all of a sudden saw these candidates for who they are from the skills perspective. And they allowed themselves to really take that initial filter, if you will, that they were not aware were there. There's a lot of biases that happen in hiring still, and we experience them, and the university has an opportunity to educate and to bring employers along so that we can open up these pipelines. But then also, our worry is that once you hire them, what's going to happen to these individuals? Because what we're seeing on college campuses is going to show up in these types of environments with these employers.
Nikki, that reminds me back to our previous episode with Gemma Elson of Fidelity and changing completely the strengths and skills that one is looking for forces you to see candidates in a completely different way. Farouk, I think that's a fascinating example. You also, in addition to your role at Johns Hopkins, host a fantastic webinar series called Vision Chats. I was honored to be a guest. Some of our audience members, I think, have been guests, and you always talk about the future, right? And thinking ahead. So as you look forward to 2022, what are we missing? What are we not talking about enough? What's on your agenda to be thinking about as we go into this next year?
Yeah, what's happening now as we are on somewhat the other side of this pandemic is that there is a desire by tradition or by just the institutions in general to want to go back to what was familiar and comfortable. And it's almost like, yeah, we've done this for a year and a half. We've embraced online learning, for example, and online engagement and all of these opportunities and technology, and we can take them with us, but we want to go back to the way things were. So that shows up in, I know this is a topic you're very familiar with, Lindsay. It starts with, how do we bring people back to work? And that's at universities and the workplace. Already, just the way that is already sold is we're bringing back to work as if we were on vacation for the last year and a half, is the wrong way to do it. So we've had to do some work to try to change a little bit that language, is maybe bring people back to location, and then what does that look like? But also, how do we bring students back? Not to education, because they've been learning for the last year and a half, but it's bringing them back maybe to our campuses. So as I look at it, I think right now we're going through this tension of what people want and what tradition wants, what all of these institutions want. And we're seeing that manifest itself in the Great Resignation. And I'm interpreting resignation not to be beyond just turning in your quitting slip, your message of I quit and I leave. It's really just people retreating from what was and are taking time to reflect and to think about what should be. That is, if we're not careful, that is going to determine what will happen in the future, 2022, 2025. So when we think about what will happen in the future, that will be part of it. What we have learned in the last couple of months is that the power now is in the hands of employees, and it's in the hands of learners, and it's in the hands of consumers. They are making those decisions. And the evidence is that now companies and organizations are rethinking even those come back to physical spaces policies and are allowing some type of hybrid. Hybrid for me, by the way, whenever I hit hybrid, it tells me that that whoever is doing hybrid just can't make a decision. So we'll just it's a sign for me that we can't decide. It's the same thing with electric cars. You can make an electric car, so it doesn't have to be hybrid, but I guess you need to go through a little bit of that transition to get people comfortable. So we're in this hybrid environment, but I think what will happen for sure is that remote work is here to stay for the majority of us. We already know that the job postings that are on LinkedIn went up from that are remote went up from 2% to 10% within the last year. So it went up 5x, and that's already pretty telling. Even though students are saying, in particular campuses like the ones in Johns Hopkins, are saying they prefer the residential experience, the residential education experience. That is not necessarily true in regional state schools that cater to different types of students. At community colleges, that is not necessarily true. So we have to separate what we're hearing from between the elites, the liberal arts, and then the regional, public, and the 2-year programs. Lots of students in those learning environments have found that learning in a remote environment has been beneficial from a cost-saving perspectives and making it efficient, allowing them to take on jobs, to be caregivers to their families, etc. So we have to pay attention to that. All of these, I think, are going to determine what will happen. The last thing that I will say about that is that we are entering into an era where skills and foundational work abilities are going to determine all of these modes and modules in higher education, in the workplace. We already know that what we had predicted would happen in the next 10 years was accelerated by this pandemic in the last year and a half. And there is a move more towards technical skills. There are skills that will be required over the next couple of years that we didn't think it would happen for another 10. That's because we have allowed automation and machine to do a lot of the work that we couldn't do ourselves during the last year and a half. That will change. That will force all of us to have to change. The World Economic Forum has already predicted that 50% of the workforce will have to go through some type of reskilling over the next 4 years by 2025. So that's already putting a different kind of pressure on universities and on the workforce. So when we think about all of this, it's curriculum that will have to change. It's the way we work that it has already changed, and it's how we deliver and how we engage learners that will change. And we have an opportunity to leverage all of this technology that's around us to be able to scale and to make it available for everyone. But we have to come out of the bottleneck, which is where we are now. This is where we're stuck. There is a little bit of this push and pull and this friction point, but it won't last. I would say, by the end of this year, we'll come out of it, and we'll finally figure out where we're headed.
Well, Fred, on that note, we will invite you back, maybe for 12 months from now, to see if we've come out of the bottleneck or not. Amazing to have you join us. Such wisdom that you've shared. I, as always, learn an awful lot on these conversations, and I've learned so much from you. Lindsay, you are our resident narrator. Would you summarize we will play this back to people, the 3 things that have come out from today?
I have a dissertation that I've written from my notes here based on Farouk's comments, always so incredibly valuable. And I so appreciate your integrated perspective. Thank you, Farouk Dey, Vice Provost for Integrative Learning and Life Design. This has been a masterclass in what integrative and life design means and why it's so valuable. A couple of key takeaways. Number 1, anything less than 100% is not inclusive. We have to give everyone access to information and opportunities, and that's true on our learners on campus, but also in organizations. Number 2, on that note, what happens on the college campus is going to happen in corporations, in organizations. So employers need to watch really carefully what's happening on campus to see what is coming down the pike for their workforce. I think that's such an important insight that has proven so true over the past couple of years. And third, thinking about the tension between what people want versus what organizations want. We're in a bit of a bottleneck now, and we need to listen to learners, to employees, to consumers, because they are going to lead the way in the future. And as you mentioned, skills, or as we call it at Capfinity, strengths, are going to be really important to that. So Farouk Dey, thank you so much for being our guest on Future Strong. Thank you to everybody who tuned in and for all of the fantastic comments. Latoya, Kathy, Michael, thank you for weighing in. Amy, nice to see you as well. We love your comments and your engagement with this topic, and we'd like to invite you back in 2 weeks for our next Future Strong episode with our friend Liz Wessel, who is the co-founder and CEO at Way Up. Nikki, would you close us out?
Well, I think we should close out by asking Farouk when we could join his next Vision Chat. So who is your next guest, and when will it be that everyone can listen in to you, Farouk?
Oh, thank you so much. So we already have Maria Flynn from JFF booked, I think, for I will look at the date here in a minute, but that's coming up. So we run Vision Chats every other Thursday. Maria Flynn is scheduled for November 4th, and we're working on the one right before her. So that's coming up. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to plug that to your audience.
Well, I want everyone across the pond to listen in. So we will become your UK bookers, and look forward to listening to Vision Chats every other Thursday. Farouk, thank you for being so giving with your time, and for everyone who's listened in and who will listen back to this episode, I hope you'll be able to take some great learnings into the work that you all do, helping our future be stronger. Thank you.
Thank you so much.